take a religious liberty offering. The reason for that is Seventh-day Adventists are champions of religious liberty, in particular the separation of church and state. That's a big deal for us because we want folks to be able to worship freely in our country. We take that for granted nowadays. There are plenty of places. We were talking just briefly this morning in Sabbath school for what I caught about how Canada even doesn't allow for some of the religious practices, such as door-to-door work, to even occur because of their limited views on religious liberty. Seventh-day Adventists champion religious liberty and have done that for a number of years. One of the main ways that we do that is through the Religious Liberty magazine. So that's I want to say it's $13 that we spend to send out a magazine each year to different entities in the government, lawyers, doctors, and whomever may have some kind of influence in the community, so that they understand the importance of freedom of worship, of freedom of religion. For Seventh-day Adventists, this is a big deal because of what we believe primarily is going to happen down the pipeline, especially when we hit Revelation 13 and 14, what will happen to this world and how liberty will be very much restrained against folks when we talk about the mark of the beast, the seal of God, etc., along those lines. This morning, I wanted to look a little bit at Jesus' experience with a nation that was similar to ours in some ways and different vastly in many other ways. Of course, that's the nation of Rome. So if you look there with me in John 18, verses 33 through 35, this is the final phases of Jesus' life as he's approaching the cross. And here he's brought before Pilate. Pilate would have been the governor of the region that he was in. Into this praetorium he is brought in, and he has this confrontation with Jesus as the Jews have dragged him in. Remember, the Jewish nation at this point is very much captive by Rome, so their laws are all under the thumb of what Rome has to say. They don't have a right, for example, to sentence a man to death. Rome would have to say that's okay or that's not okay, etc. So now Jesus is brought in before Pilate here, and we have this classic confrontation, which we see in all the Gospels, but this is interesting. Therefore Pilate entered again into the praetorium and summoned Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Now context, so you understand where this is coming from. There had been many false messiahs before Jesus' time that claimed they were the king of the Jews. They were the one to lead Israel, Judaism, out of captivity of Rome. So Rome was very tense about this situation because every so-called Messiah that had raised up at that point in time had always had in mind to overthrow Roman captivity. That's what the Romans believed a Jewish king, if he was set in place, would try to do. So this is a weighted question that Pilate is asking Jesus. Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus answers off just a little bit. Are you saying this on your own initiative, or did others tell you about me? So he's trying to figure out, Jesus wants to know, is this something that's coming from your heart? Or is this something that you heard somebody else just reported it to you? So Jesus is pricking a little bit of conscience here within Pilate. But notice how Pilate answers. He's very resistant. I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and chief priests delivered you to me. What have you done? And Jesus sets his mind at ease because in Pilate's mind he's thinking, okay, what are you doing? Are you setting up militias? Are you setting up a war? What are you trying to do? Why do you have your own people against you, so much so that now they've dragged you in front of me? What evil have you done? Jesus answered and immediately changes the tone, takes the total left-hand turn of what Pilate expects. Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm. So that's a very weighted answer. That's a very heavy answer that Pilate received. So Jesus is operating on a plane very much above what Pilate expects. Jesus is reasoning in a way that is counter to what all other false messiahs had presented to the Jews, to those who had caught on to the idea of overthrowing the Roman Empire, etc. Jesus is not operating on that same wavelength. He's operating in a different way, in a different fashion, as he speaks to Pilate. And that's where I want to deal with this morning. Because as Christians, we are supposed to rise above what this world is and how it operates. Now, just a bit of American history so that we understand the importance of religious liberty. As the Pilgrims fled and came over to the United States, one of the primary reasons was for religious freedom. They wanted to get away from the oppression of the Protestants and the Catholics, always warring. Didn't matter who was put into place in England or in France or wherever was put into place. Those powers, because the government was very much religious, whether Protestant or Catholic, would always impose their laws upon the people to the detriment of either Protestants or Catholics, and it just got to be very, very messy, very quick over that way. So the Pilgrims coming over to the United States, Plymouth Rock and all of that history that we have, was primarily to escape persecution imposed by religious governments that they had seen and witnessed for themselves. Ironically, as they came over, and this is just a very brief overview, ironically, as they came over and they set up their own towns there in England and in New England and made their cities and whatnot, we have in history what was called the Salem witch trials, which is very much religion imposing its will upon the people. So our forefathers, as they knew what had happened over in Europe, and then they saw what also happened in New England and the persecution that had been brought upon folks at that time, if you were not of the same faith, they understood what had to be, as we established our own government after the Revolutionary War, etc., that it had to be separate. Religion had to be separate from governments. That's the idea of separation of church and state. It's one of the main reasons why the United States is as great as it is, because it's not dominated by one religion over the other. The idea is that all men have equal rights to be able to do as they see within the freedom and context of our great nation. So this is why we come to John chapter 18, and we see that Jesus operates outside of the principles of the governments of this world. And he's outlining that to Pilate. He's helping them to understand. And I want to understand what Christ is getting at, because this is not something that he just willy-nilly presents to Pilate. This is something that he actually taught to his disciples. If you look back with me just a little bit in the Gospel of John, John chapter 17 and verse 11, we'll see that Jesus spoke of this to his disciples also. And this is, of course, Jesus' prayer with his disciples. But take note of how he's summing up his ministry to them. Verse 11, I am no longer in the world, and yet they themselves are in the world. And I come to you, Holy Father, keep them in your name, the name which you have given me, that they may be one, even as we are. So he's praying for unity there. But then verses 14 of 15 of John chapter 17, I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. So this is the picture that he's giving to his disciples, a grander picture, a bigger perspective of how they're to view their existence in this world. They are not born of this world when they follow Jesus. They are of a different place. They are of a different existence beyond what this world is. They are not of this world. But Jesus goes on to say, verse 15, I do not ask you to take them out of the world, but to keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, verse 16, even as I am not of the world. So it's an interesting concept that Christ presents here for us in our own Christian walk. The way that we view our citizenship, the way that we view how we've existed, is through God himself, is through the heavenly courts. That's where we're from. That's our citizenship. That's why we're not of this world. But even though our citizenship is there, here we are in this world, having to suffer all the depravity, all the problems, all that sin has to bring forward in this world. And Christ prays for his disciples here that they're not taken out of the world, but that they're kept from the evil one. And that really sums up our existence in this life, isn't it? That's the way that we walk through this world in faith. We're here, and we believe that our citizenship is in heaven. We believe that by faith, Christ is one day going to take us to heaven, but we have to walk through the trouble that is this world right now. And that's the experience of all the saints throughout time. God doesn't just remove them from the trouble of life. He helps them to be preserved through the trouble. He helps them to be able to weather the storm. He helps them to make it through the trouble and time that there is. You know that I'm from Eastern North Carolina. You know that during hurricanes and whatnot, have you ever been through a hurricane? You know what that is? Big, massive storms, they categorize them up to 3, 4, 5, depending on how violent the storm is, how fast the wind is moving in the hundreds of miles per hour at times. You know that in a hurricane, there usually is an eye. The eye of the hurricane usually moves about 12 to 20 miles per hour. Theoretically, if you could get in your car during a hurricane that's hitting land and stay in the eye of the storm, you'd be relatively okay to be able to move, even though this thing is destroying and just wreaking havoc all over the place. You'd be okay in the eye of the hurricane if you could just follow around 12, 20 miles an hour inside your car. That would work out okay for you. Of course, knowing which direction the hurricane is going would be quite the challenge. Well, that is an analogy for us in the way that a Christian's life should be. Even though there's destruction and havoc just all around us, and we see crazy things happening and evil all around us, when we're in Christ, it's like we're in that eye of the hurricane. It's as if God is preserving us through the trouble that we face. And that's important for us to understand, especially as we face troubled times in this world. Well, I want to get a definition of what it means to be in the world. And John, one of Jesus' disciples, helps us out with that. If you turn with me to 1 John chapter 2. 1 John chapter 2, John, the beloved, who also wrote Revelation and the Gospel of John itself, helps us to understand what it is to be in the world. Jesus would often say, you're in the world, but not of the world. We just read that in John 17. But 1 John chapter 2 helps us to define and see what it is to be in the world. The things that we need to understand and to avoid as we're facing this life. One of the fallacies, one of the problems of living as a Christian in this world is that sometimes we can think that, this is just the way things have to go. It's just natural. We shouldn't resist. We should just go on and just make it as easy as possible. Actually, it's quite a struggle to be in this world as you're a Christian. It's not as easy as you think it would be. John gives us this guidance. It's 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. First he says, do not love the world, nor the things in the world. It's a heavy sentence, something for us to consider. It's easy to fall in love with the things of the world that's produced, but he goes on to define what that is for us. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, verse 16, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. So we have this definition and understanding of what the world is. These things that we're supposed to war against, that we're supposed to fight against in our own minds, in our own Christian walk, as we draw closer to Jesus. All that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. Of course, the lust of the flesh would be the things that our flesh naturally falls into. I remember my oldest son being just a young Christian. I baptized him at, I think, 13 years old. I remember doing studies with him and sitting down and explaining exactly what he was doing. And in his young heart, being of that age, we try to have as open a relationship as we can with our kids. Being of that age, I think he said to me and Monica, my wife, "It's just too hard." He was just being honest with me. It's just too hard. And I told him, "You're absolutely right. It is just too hard." When you're fighting against your natural tendencies in this world, it is hard. It can be difficult to resist the things that your flesh is naturally drawn towards. It can be difficult to say no to things that you don't want to say no to, especially the habits that we get into, especially what we deem as we deserve in our own life. These things can be difficult to get into. The lust of the eyes, of course, this automatically draws me to screen time. Do you know what screen time is? Something we have to deal with our kids. Screen time is just dominating everybody's life nowadays. There's no escaping screen time nowadays. Folks have to be behind screens to be able to get things done, to be able to accomplish and work and make things happen in their own world. But man, there is so much stuff that enters in through the eyes that destroys the soul. And it's important for us to know and to protect not only our own minds, but our children's eyes also, of all the things that are out there. And then, of course, the boastful pride of life. The idea that we always need more. So, speaking to my immaturity as a growing person, do you remember Amway? Do you remember that company? In North Carolina, as I was first dating Monty, we had an Amway representative come over and try to get us hooked up with their scheme. You know what kind of scheme it is, right? If you get one of your friends to buy into the program, and then they're under you, and then their friends are under you, and then it's just a whole, of course, pyramid scheme, and they get you all excited about this kind of thing, and how much, they try to get the dollar signs in your eyes. How much do you want to make in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years? And I remember just being immature and saying, $1 million, that kind of thing, thinking along those lines. Now when I read texts like this, it just brings me back to my dumb self. And I think about that, the boastful pride of life, that goal that so many people still attain to as if money is everything. One of the realities that I've come to understand and know is that no matter how much money you have or how much money you don't have, depression and misery can always be there. Doesn't matter what you have. If you're not handling yourself, if you're not handling your own faith and your own direction in life, doesn't matter what you have. You can be just as miserable with money or without money. And John helps us to understand these are the ways of the world. This is the way that the world thinks. The way that the world processes value is through what the flesh wants, what the eyes see, and what the heart desires. All of those things. John lets us know, though, verse 17, in context as Christians, the world is passing away, and also its lust. All of this stuff that we value so much is going bye-bye. It's going to be gone. But the one who does the will of God lives forever. And that's the ultimate goal, everlasting life. The life that God gives to us, everlasting life, begins now for us. But it begins with a mindset. It begins with an understanding. It begins with a value system of knowing what is important in this world. So, Hebrews 13, verse 5, our last text this morning. If you turn there with me. Hebrews 13 and verse 5. The writer of Hebrews here gives us this important memo, if you will, that helps us to understand, helps us to give context. Now, money is necessary in this world. It's something that we have to deal with. It's something that we function around. But verse 5 is quite pointed. Make sure that your character, my version may be a little bit different than yours, but my version, the New American Standard, says, make sure that your character is free from the love of money. That's a challenge for us. When you examine your own life, make sure that you're not just existing for money, existing for the love of money, existing as my dumb self did, watching this Amway program and just wanting $1 million. You know, be free of that. Make sure your character is free from the love of money. And the contrast there is being content with what you have. And then the qualifier for us, that last part of verse 5. For he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you. So that we confidently say, verse 6, the Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. What will man do to me? The Christian life, the Christian walk of faith, is very much about relying more and more on Jesus. Trusting more and more in Him for everything. At first, it may just be one thing that we give up, but eventually, as we're walking with Christ, we realize everything has to be yielded to Him. Everything must be given up to Him. This is true freedom for the Christian. This is what we aspire to. This is what we want to have in our own life. Freedom from this world, to be in the world, but not of the world. And that's my prayer for us this morning, is that we can have that as our thought as we move forward. Not just to be so enamored with this world that we forget about the Lord of this world, the one who ultimately gives us eternal life. With that, let's go ahead and sing our final hymn this morning. Hymn number 444. I'm a Pilgrim. Hymn 444. And let's see how this one goes, right? So please stand with me. Okay, there it is, yeah. Standard time, all right. So good. Mm-hmm. I'm a pilgrim and I'm a stranger. Father in heaven, we want to thank you for our citizenship that is promised in heaven.